Two of the newest entry points into the EV market, and two car people to have a look around them. With so much hype about both of these vehicles, Paddy and myself thought, let's have a little look around both of them and see which is the one to go for.
So this is the Dacia Spring. It's Ireland's cheapest car and it just happens to be an EV. You can have one of these starting off for under 17 grand. You can get one with no deposit, 0% finance, so it's a really accessible way into a new car. It comes with a pretty small battery, the smallest battery you can get on an EV at the moment, 26.8 kilowatts. Doesn't go very far, the range is about 200 kilometers on a full charge, but it's good value, and for lots of people this is going to be a decent entry level car.
On the other hand, you have the Hyundai Inster, which some could argue is actually underpriced in Ireland. This car is more expensive in the UK, it's more expensive in Germany, and we've lost a couple of trim bits to make this car more affordable, but the entry price is 18,995, and for a little bit more, but not too much more, you can get it with a 49 kilowatt hour battery and a real world range of certainly 300 kilometers. Why don't we start with what we both like at the front? So that thing has a streetscape down here to talk about how it's an urban car.
Yeah, it's quite cool actually. I mean, as urban streetscape bumpers go, it's one of the better ones.
Does that mean it's purely an urban streetscape
well,
car?
I mean, I think it does give you an indication of where this car needs to live. This is a city car, and do you know what? Dacia have made no pretense that this is anything but that. It's a car that you will be better off spending all the time in town in a village. It's only when you get onto the motorway and you get on to try and stretch this car's legs a bit more that you really start to see its limitations, which I don't think is the case with the Inster.
That said, you have driven this car to Cork, to Dublin, for those who know the landscape of Ireland. How many times this week?
Twice.
Right.
With varying success. The other night I did it for a full battery from Dublin as far as sort of Manorstone and Laois, charged up again and got to where I was going. So one stop. This morning was a bit different because the temperature was quite low when I was starting off. So I ended up charging 3 times today. Difficulty with this car, of course, is the speed of the charging. It will only charge at the maximum of 30 kilowatts on a fast charger. The entry-level model doesn't even come with fast charging. So when you do, even if you do find a really fast charger, you are waiting quite a while to charge up. So, you know, on a motorway in particular, this car doesn't really like going much over 100 kilometers per hour. If you do, you really will see that battery level go down, and because it's so light, tends to buffet and bounce a bit as well.
Yes. On the other hand, this car has faster charging. You're talking around real world, probably 80 kilowatt, and it has battery preconditioning in certain trims. So there's a signature one, which is Signature and Elegance, I think are the two trims. It's been a while since I've filmed the Insta, albeit 3 times previously. So you're going to spend less time at a charger. And this car today was doing, in reasonable nice weather, 15, 14 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. What about the Spring?
I was seeing on the drive home the other day, 12.5 was my average. Today, 13.6. on the way up, so a little bit more, but the battery is so much smaller that, you know, you're looking. I saw a maximum potential range of 210 the other day, but in real terms it's probably, you know, any time you're outside of the city it's going to be sort of 160 or 70 in reality.
One thing you mentioned as well is that car buffets and bounces. It doesn't even weigh a ton.
No, it's just short of 1,000 kilograms.
And for an EV, that's an achievement.
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of those cars that I think if you saw it on its own, if it had the market to itself, it would be something that we'd perceive differently. But this one, unfortunately for Dacia, has come along and is trying to steal its lunch.
For convenience, both cars have their charging port on the front, although I already see that this has a crack in it. I don't know how that happened. It wasn't on our watch. It's obviously not part of the charging housing. That is an issue with frontal taps and knocks with the charging port on the front. But from an actually fitting it into a charging space, it actually makes life a lot easier.
Boot space on both cars is actually pretty decent. In the Spring, it's 250 litres, which is fine for most people who are going to be driving a car like this. You can fold the seats flat and you get about 636 litres which turns it into a minivan of sorts. In the case of the Inster, slightly smaller boot starting off, 238 litres. However, this car does have a bit of a party trick. Because in this car, you can slide these seats forward and that gives you an extra 110 litres of luggage space. A real plus point for the Inster is the amount of space in here. I'm 6'2", I'm not really that thin, and I have tons of headroom, tons of knee room, and Mark has his seat back pretty much the whole way. So even for taller drivers, you're going to feel totally comfortable in here. It's not quite as spacious in the back of the Spring, but not bad. There's space because the back of the front seat is hollowed out, and there's a decent enough amount of headroom, but nowhere near as big as the Inster.
When you close the door of the Spring, it kind of sounds like a van. There's a sort of a tinny feel off it, so comparison-wise. There's lots of physical buttons in this car, and it might be a little bit simpler for an older demographic, not to offend anybody or anything like that, who might be able to just work out what does what in this car a little bit quicker than in the Inster. You get a very large floating shelf for storing bits and pieces in. You can obviously get those U-clip attachments that you can put phones and drinks holders. They're spread right across the vehicle. And the whole basic thing is a little bit evident compared to the Ioniq, which this car has a physical handbrake, for example. The gear shifter is low down here, whereas on the Inster it's on a stalk where you'd find the volume control on the Spring. So everything feels a little bit more affordable and plasticky. There's still nice uses of colours and textures, but it doesn't feel as premium as the Inster in my opinion. Close the door and straight away that feels a lot more solid. And what I like about the Inster is pretty much the interior is from a more expensive Hyundai, such as the steering wheel, which is the same as the Ioniq 5, your 3-level climate control, again still physical buttons, a separate screen here, and also like the Spring, we have a floating shelf, although it's not as big as the Spring, this floating shelf idea. But you can slide across both of these seats because yes, there's an armrest in the higher trim version, but you've nothing in the way here, so you can just slide across and you've got the flat floor. And things such as the reverse screen have slightly better clarity on them. So they're kind of areas where it doesn't feel as cheap inside. Paddy, looks wise, Inster, very futuristic looking, not quite as polarizing maybe as the Ioniq 5, but this light bar is, I like it.
I love it as well. It just gives me sort of 1980s vibes. Looks really good, and even in black as well, it looks really good. And bearing in mind, this is a car that starts at under €19,000, and it's set to appeal to a fairly broad demographic. But I think even young drivers would feel okay driving this. I know it is a little bit MPV-ish and SUV-ish combined in some areas, but I just think it's a really good looking little car.
When I lived with it for a week, you may have seen that video, I brought it into multi-storey car parks in Dublin city centre, and they can be notoriously narrow because they were designed in the 60s and 70s. And not only can you get in and get out of this thing, you've got huge space on either side, in between the lines. Like they're much easier to live with if you're doing that kind of driving.
There's a touch of the Japanese K car about it, really, because it has that small footprint, but they've fitted so much into that footprint as well. So just a good looking little car, I think.
And Hyundai recently announced they're bringing a commercial version of the Inster to Ireland. It may be 2026 or it could be later 2025, but it is happening.
Yeah, if you had a florist or a bakery or something, that's a great car, great choice.
Could you use it as a taxi?
Certainly space-wise, yes, because I can fit comfortably in the back with those seats slid back. Not sure what you would do to your luggage if you were taking too many passengers, but I mean, as an urban sort of get you home from the pub taxi, 100%.
Yeah, just no baggage.
No baggage.
Although everyone has baggage after a few drinks. Meanwhile, rear of the Spring, not as dramatic looking maybe.
No, but not a bad looking car. I mean, we talked about this streetscape look on the bumper, which does make an otherwise, pretty basic bumper look a slightly bit more interesting. They've done a decent job in terms of the graphics and the design of their rear lights. And overall, it's not a bad looking car. It has a slightly jacked up feel to it. There's hints of rugged, even though obviously you wouldn't have the ability to do that. But overall, it's not a bad looking car. At least it's colourful, it's striking, and those copper tones in the wing mirrors as well are not bad looking too. So this is the extreme version. So it has upgraded wheels and it has various adornments which will make it look, allegedly prettier. But I don't think it's a terrible car, just not as pretty as the Inster.
On the driving front now, so there's a 45 brake horsepower and a 65 brake horsepower version of this.
Okay.
And then on the larger battery, there's 113 brake horsepower, or 90 odd. I think it's 95 on the smaller battery, which is still 42 kilowatt hours. It's not a massive difference. So from a motorway driving, or just any driving, you're going to rather be in the Inster.
Yeah, of course. And the Spring has, how can I put it, very pedestrian acceleration. Not to 100 kilometers per hour takes about 3.5 weeks.
Yeah.
That's conservative. Yeah. And obviously as well, once you do start pushing this car on, you do notice the range starts getting pretty alarming.
And you noticed a big drop today.
Yeah,
pulling
out of Fermoy, fully charged, or not fully charged, up to about 80%. And as I pulled out to join the motorway and reach motorway speeds, I suddenly was at 67% from 80%, just randomly.
It didn't go back up?
No.
Okay, that's a bit interesting.
But again, look, the amount of times anyone who buys a Spring, and sorry, if you do intend doing a lot of motorway driving, just do not buy a Spring.
Yeah. I think there's definitely an argument now more than ever with electric cars. You can absolutely buy the wrong car now.
Yeah, you can. And price is one thing, but as well as that, you would have to consider that, look, if you're really strict on price, your budget is X and you're not budging anymore, the second-hand market currently for EVs is really, really good. You could be in something like a good Hyundai Kona with a big battery for 20 grand.
And if you want something that's a little bit more usable on but what if, I need to drive to Donegal within an hour's notice? I think I'd rather, even for a comfort point of view, I'd rather be in that. And weirdly, if I was just confined to a city centre all the time, this is more ruggedness, as you pointed out. If someone hits off it, will you care a little bit less in a good way about leaving this car in a car park?
Yeah, it's funny. This car, and not in this guise, but has been on sale in mainland Europe for quite a while. And you see them littered all over cities, and they have that sort of Rome quality of being banging into the car behind it. So, yeah, you would imagine it's pretty cheap to repair these cars. So, for that sense, yeah, absolutely great.
So, Paddy, we've been talking about how they both drive in terms of, on paper, such and such brake horsepower. If you want to have a look at how they actually drive, I mean, that's a sharper car to drive. This is, I don't want to say more comfortable, but it's a little bit more floaty.
It's springy, it's bouncy in a way, like a Citroen 2CV or something, but nimble. There's some pretty rubbish tyres on this one though.
Yes.
And they don't provide an awful lot of grip when you get outside of the city, so I would probably change those if I bought one of these.
Ling long. I mean,
I don't think they talk about those in Formula One circles.
No. Max is not pulling in 2.5 seconds to get them.
I need some new Ling Longs.
Visit, please. Anyway, if you want to see what these cars are actually like to drive, I've got reviews for both of them. I'll leave it at the end of the video or in the link down below, whichever is easier to click on, and then you'll see what's the handling like, how does the range change. I did a motorway range test in that car as well. I did some motorway driving in this car. I just didn't test it. It's just not a car that's comfortable on a motorway for lots of reasons.
Yeah, it is. It suffers quite a bit once you push it beyond sort of 95 kilometers per hour. It is light. It does get buffeted by the wind.
And trucks.
You do get bullied by trucks and buses, or gardening vans, as the case in the video. Yeah. But look, I feel bad for this car in a way because the Inster has really just robbed its lunch, and I don't think that's going to change. But for some people, it will be just what they want.
That's the overview of the two cars. Is it a fair contest even?
It's not really. I firmly believe if the Spring had the pitch to itself, we would be talking about it in a different way.
Yeah.
The Spring is a perfect little city car. And at that job, it does a really good job. And it's simple to use for someone who just wants an easy car to live with that's going to be low maintenance, go to the shops, maybe drop a kid to school, a second car in the family. It does a really good job. But the Inster is so, I would say, maybe too cheap for the price that it is. I think that, it's great for the consumer, but they certainly could have priced it higher. It's just a very different proposition in every regard, in terms of quality, in terms of battery size, in terms of charging. It's just a really different prospect.
It's probably a more versatile vehicle because you could, I'm not saying you want to stop from Dublin to Cork in this or Dublin to Donegal, but you'd probably stop less than in this. I think you'd feel a little bit, like I had a guy in a landscape gardener van. Again, if you've seen the video, you'll have seen how close he was to this car. I found people kind of bully you off the road less in this.
Well, I mean, there's an argument for saying that with the Inster that it does everything anyone could really need from a car. It's spacious, it has long range, it charges quickly, it's well equipped. Whereas there are some compromises with this car. It is a willing little car, but on its own, fine. Compared to this car, it's a different conversation.
It is worth pointing out that Dacia are doing a 0% and zero deposit offer with this.
Yeah.
So you could probably own this car for less per month than this car.
Yeah, for sure. And for some people, the accessibility of getting into this car is going to be a big appeal. And look, if you lived in the centre of Dublin or the centre of Cork or wherever it is, and that's all you needed, for fine. But as I said, if this car was starting at 25,000, it would be a different conversation.
And after July 2025, that could be entirely possible. At the Irish launch of this car, Hyundai said, don't be surprised if this car is €1,000 or €500 more expensive than it currently is. And I think when that happens and that doesn't go up, it's not we're having a different argument, but it's slightly more compelling for what it is.
But the thing is, this is the extreme model for just under €20,000. How would you compare the entry level of that versus the one you really have to buy, which is this?
Yeah. I think the entry level of that would still be enough.
Yep.
You know? So let us know what you think. Which one would you go for? Price, again, in Ireland makes it more of a story, really, than if you're watching this in the UK. Feel free to get involved in the comments down below. We do a podcast together, by the way, called Drivers Republic Podcast. It is wherever you get your podcasts.
Correct.
As they say. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.